Hello, good day, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Allegiance Group Pursuant webinar, Breaking the Mold on Donor Acquisition. We've had really great turnout today, and we are super glad that you are here. Before we jump into our content, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, so if you need to step away, cut off early, we've got you covered. We'll email the slides and the webinar recording link over to you tomorrow. Additionally, throughout today, feel free to use the Zoom Q&A or Zoom chat to engage with us today. So pop in any questions that you might have along the way. Our Director of Marketing, Leah, will address your questions at the end of our presentation today. So we'll conclude with a little Q&A. If we don't have time to answer all of our questions, we often reply in writing. So get them in, leave your information, and we'll get an answer back to you one way or another. Also today, we'd love to know why you signed up and what you're looking to learn. So if you would take just a moment right now to use that chat or Q&A to drop in what you're looking for in just a few words, that would be super helpful to us. So quick introductions. Hello again. I'm Matthew Milcarrick. I lead our analytics and insights team at Allegiance Group Pursuant. My team's role is to partner with our clients to turn their data into a strategic asset. I'm joined today by my colleague, Laura Henriksen. Laura leads our integrated media solutions team, and she's responsible for overseeing all paid media strategy and execution at Allegiance Group Pursuant. What's really interesting about Laura's work is that so often in direct response, we are relentlessly focused on driving that gift. And Laura and team see things a bit more holistically, focusing on the full marketing pyramid, not just conversion, and focuses on awareness and engagement and shows us how those strategies drive growth. And so she will be sharing that approach with us today. And then finally, the star of our show, welcome Christine Mazzullo, the Director of Donor Engagement at Water for People. Christine is a fundraising innovator, and she's going to show you how she brought the challenge of a flat program with limited acquisition and upgrades to Laura and team, and how they arrived at new acquisition strategies to stimulate growth at her organization. So the reason many of you are all here. So they will introduce themselves and their work a bit more as they kick off. I wanted to set the stage just a little bit further by before handing it over to Christine. And I want to acknowledge that fundraisers, we are operating in a really funky place right now. The landscape is full of contradictions. We know that revenue is typically growing, but donor counts are down. We know that engagement is shifting, but we're not sure entirely how. We know that households are typically less philanthropic from a participation rate than they have been in the past. At the same time, technology, digital experiences, demographics are really changing the ways that individuals engage with nonprofits. And so back to that funky place where we are, we know that finding new donors, a task many of us have or feel like strategies that need to be in place, that feels more difficult than ever. And in many ways, it really is. And so we believe this group together that donor acquisition really requires a new playbook. And so that's what you'll see from us today, those new rules for engaging new audiences, and really that path towards success aligned with how philanthropy is changing. So thanks for joining this discussion with us. And with that, Christine, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's webinar. I'm really excited to be with you all today. I'm just going to start off by sharing a bit about my organization, Water for People, and then I'm going to dive into the journey that we've been on to incorporate a donor acquisition strategy into our fundraising. And we are an international nonprofit with more than 30 years of experience changing lives in communities across 9 countries through access to safe water and dignified toilets. We believe that access to water is a human right, and we know that a lack of access directly intersects with areas like climate, health, education, livelihoods, and gender. Our work in Africa and India and Latin America is informed by our Everyone Forever model. So if you want to take the slides forward. Um, Everyone means water and sanitation for every family, every clinic, every school, including the hardest to reach. And it means that our teams that are based in the countries that we work in are collaborating with local communities on things like protecting water sources, training mechanics, and establishing supply chains for parts. It also means that we think about long-term projects like advocating for national water policies and creating local water and sanitation utilities. The forever part of our model means that we don't exit a community until we know it's aid independent and water services will last for generations to come. I share all of this because it's important to know your organization's unique value proposition, especially as you consider a donor acquisition strategy, because it will inform everything from your messaging to targeting soon to donor audiences. So we're going to hop into the journey here, and I'm going to share a little bit about what's sort of transpired over the last several years at our organization. Like many nonprofits, we've been responding to shifting fundraising landscapes. And historically, the organization's fundraising had been built specifically on a major gifts fundraising strategy, which we define as $10,000 or more. We were founded out of an association of water sector professionals who have been very loyal supporters, but our database and our reach was very small. This changed in 2020 when Water for People was featured in a New York Times article as a nonprofit to support during the pandemic. And the public at that time was much more attuned to the need to give and really leaning in. And so this unexpected exposure for us drew a lot of attention from more donors giving smaller gifts. And so, in the spirit of a startup, the organization responded by creating the team that I lead, the donor engagement team. And the focus at that time was really to create a donor journey that hadn't existed to cultivate these new donors. 2 years later, internal foundations to support retaining and cultivating mass donors were in place. And this was especially important because the fundraising landscape post-pandemic reflected decreasing larger gifts by major donors. And the organization, Water for People, was incredibly fortunate at that time to be a recipient of a Mackenzie Scott donation. And among the organizational investments that it made to support opportunity and innovation, it invested in its first ever donor acquisition strategy to build on the donor file growth that we saw was possible during the pandemic. So at that time, Allegiance Group was actually selected as our partner for this. And 3 years now into our partnership, at a time when the fundraising landscape is reflecting that revenue diversification is a critical priority for probably all of us, we've built up brand awareness, we've tested and created controls and acquired data that's helping us drive a full fundraising marketing funnel to both acquire and to retain donors. So just looking back again, next slide, please. Reflecting back, before Water for People made its investment in donor acquisition, there was flat donor file growth, and donors had a very limited experience, limited engagement, unless you were a major donor and then you were assigned to a relationship manager on our major gifts team. If you did find us, our messaging about our work was very complex and very internally focused, not donor-centric at all. And the full fundraising ecosystem, incorporating both retention and acquisition to drive a holistic pipeline that could nimbly meet the donor selected journey, it wasn't in place yet. So moving forward to now, through our partnership with Allegiance Group, our direct response fundraising program today is informed by analysis and tracking of key performance indicators on dashboards that we've co-created together. We've established benchmarks specific to Water for People, which enables us to track our progress, but also to compare our results with nonprofit sector benchmarks. Data is helping us balance our investment across retention and acquisition to get the strongest results. And strategies are deployed across multi-channels to achieve an omni-channel donor journey. And so this is supporting both recognition and visibility. It's attracting donor leads that align specifically with our mission, and it's helping us cultivate donors to give more and to give more frequently. So within Water for People's internal fundraising growth strategy, these strategies are driving primarily unrestricted revenue for the organization, which helps cover the costs that restricted fundraising does not. But it's also building a pipeline of prospects for greater cultivation. So, how have we broken the mold with the program that we've built together for Water for People? Early on in our partnership, Allegiance Group performed a competitor analysis, and this confirmed that we had very little brand recognition among the public outside of that New York Times article. And in fact, there was a lot of brand confusion about Water for People with other like organizations. So before we even dove fully into a acquisition strategy, we took the time to shift the budget to build more brand awareness, allow for more lead generation, and to build that fundraising marketing funnel. And this required much more simplified messaging about what we do and driving visibility through digital strategies, knowing that it would be necessary to include ways to warm lead audiences, which can take quite a bit of time. If you want to move to the next slide. It also included very intentional testing, learning, and pivoting, starting with creating a fundraising marketing funnel, as I mentioned, which really turns that traditional fundraising pyramid upside down, which is something we're not always used to. Using digital strategies, including paid advertising and search, we've been able to target prospects with specific actions, moving them from visitors to petition takers to subscribers to donors. And we've tested a variety of newer channels and platforms, which I've shared on this slide. At the same time, we've incorporated traditional strategies like list rental through the mail. And as we've incorporated tests, we've gathered insights and data to inform what's working, help us establish control strategies and packages, retarget, and create lookalike audiences. And I'll note here that when we initially partnered with Allegiance Group, it was specifically just on donor acquisition, and we were managing our donor retention strategies internally. And we realized pretty quickly that to be our most nimble and also ensure that we were maximizing our investments in both, we really needed Allegiance's partnership on both acquisition and retention. So we shifted our partnership to reflect this. So the next slide, I'm just going to share just a quick example of the flow of our new integrated strategies. So you'll see a digital ad for lead generation on the left, and then how we then engage to acquire both digitally and in the mail. We very intentionally steward to share impact and then carry the same themes and messaging all the way through to retain donors with very specific and special touches for newly acquired donors. And we also incorporate data-informed asks to increase support or consider becoming a reoccurring donor. I'll also note here that it's been great that Allegiance Group has recently expanded their capabilities to include Giving DNA, which is a platform that helps nonprofits analyze donor data, understand their giving behavior, and identify potential for increased and greater giving. As we do list selects alongside Allegiance Group now, we're able to target specific donor groups for cultivation, and it's really enhancing our insights and how we do that. The next two slides, I'm just going to share a little bit around the movement of our data and KPIs. And the first, really, this reflects the evolution of diversifying our strategies to drive revenue by including acquisition as part of this. As I shared a little bit earlier, major gifts were a primary source for fundraising historically, which meant that we had a very inflated average gift. And so with the influx of new donors giving smaller gifts came in response to that New York Times article in April of 2020. There was nothing in place at that time to retain them, so we had a steep drop off. And we also did see our average gift come down when we started to acquire more traditional donors, which is to be expected. So that wasn't a surprise. But post-pandemic and with the introduction of a balanced program across donor retention and acquisition, we're now seeing stabilization with a healthy average gift and giving frequency that reflects this rebalancing. And so for us, this makes our program more stable and less reliant on larger gifts. Do you want to take it to the next slide? Historically, prior to 2020, Water for People also had a really high donor retention rate, and that was reflective of some of that founding audience that I was mentioning earlier. But when we started our investment in donor acquisition, we naturally saw some fluctuation in this retention rate, which again is a completely natural part of building the program. So we focused in on our first and our second year retention strategies by mapping very intentional and focused communications and touch points to increase first and second year retention, which really supports your return on investment for donor acquisition. And then it paves this path for multi-year donors, which are our most valuable donors. So in our most recent donor performance analysis, which Allegiance Group ran for us, we show that our multi-year donor retention rate is 78%, which is on the higher side of things and a really positive indicator. So what have we learned? We've learned a lot in a very short period of time, in just a few years. I think most importantly, it's about having a commitment to data-informed strategies, which is not always where our heads go when we think about maybe fundraising or just general strategies. But I think putting a foundation in place to be able to collect the data and then making sure that you're pausing and reflecting on what it's telling you. Putting a funnel in place for us has been pivotal. Again, it's helping inform where we focus and invest strategies and to be disciplined about how we engage, like prioritizing a single and key call to action. Increasing visibility for our nonprofit, it's a long-term strategy. We've really committed to that now because we see the difference it's making. And so while we continue to test and evolve, keeping a very steady strategy of creating brand awareness through evergreen ads is really critical. And for messaging, bridging our work to audiences when it can, our work as an international organization can feel very far away from people. To understand it has meant curating stories from the teams in those countries, the communities in those countries, and video has played a really important role in this. Keeping messaging accessible has been a big shift for us. And while there are audiences that will naturally align with our mission, we remain very, very open to new audiences, especially because, as I mentioned at the start of my slides, our mission intersects with a lot of other areas that may be of interest to donors, like health, education. So we continue to test into new audiences. We're continuously evolving and strengthening coordination internally across data and teams to maximize the pipeline. That's ongoing work. And we continue to deepen our strategies and strengthen our program investments, like my mention of targeting second-year retention rates and promoting things like reoccurring giving to increase multi-year donors. And the biggest takeaway, I think, is just making the commitment to a donor acquisition strategy with the understanding that both retention and acquisition are necessary for a stable and growing donor file. So my last slide here, I know sometimes we all struggle with, gaining the commitment internally to make the investment. And so I'll just share a little bit about my journey to establish a donor acquisition strategy, which has included, for me, getting a commitment for an investment from Water for People's global leadership team. Um, and takeaways for me is just that the conversation should include sharing insights with them about the fundraising landscape trends and how these may impact your organization, and how there's an opportunity to proactively put strategies in place for donor file health and resiliency. And to take the time to support their knowledge of direct response fundraising so that everyone understands it includes both retention and acquisition. Neither of these is a standalone strategy. They work together to create a pipeline for greater levels of giving. So it's a full fundraising team strategy. So for us, our pipeline expands over, we're comprised of 4 sub-teams in our fundraising team, from, major gifts to donor engagement, our comms team, and even institutional giving. And so there's a lot of coordination across those sub-teams. It also is important to emphasize that it's an investment in a strategies that build cumulatively over time. It's not a one and done investment or strategy. And know that you're going to have to track, analyze, and report out on results. For me, it's been a kind of an aha to make sure that I'm reporting out on both the positives and the challenges, because there will be challenges along the way, and there's always a way to strategize around them. And also continue to share progress, both quantitative data. I've talked a lot about tracking data, but also qualitative stories of how donors are moving through the pipeline. And so I do this pretty consistently. And I talk about how we may recruit a donor who's giving a much smaller gift, they move into a reoccurring donor. And then ultimately, sometimes we see them move into a planned giver who's giving a major gift. And so I think that's been a big aha internally for a lot of our leadership team, to sort of see this trajectory through the pipeline. And to just continue to repeat this process over and over again. It's an ongoing conversation, and really important that you lead on the conversation, because nobody else may bring that conversation to your leadership. So that's been the journey that Water for People has been on. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think you can all see why Water for People is one of our favorite clients here at AGP. Um, so I am going to spend a few minutes now taking you through some practical examples and use cases of how within the Integrated Media Solutions team here at AGP, we put together some of those data-driven strategies that Christine talked about. So we will, everything that I'm about to talk through is very scalable. I know we have a really interesting mix of organization categories here, organization sizes. So please know that all the thought starters that I'm about to walk through are really scalable. As your program goes, as the data tells you, it's something that you can kind of grow with as you continue to get the leadership approval and some of the other things Christine was talking about. The first massive opportunity that I really want to encourage all of you to take advantage of is maximizing your first party data. I spent the first 20 plus years of my career in kind of traditional B2C and B2B marketing, and coming into this space, it is just phenomenal and powerful to me to see all of the first party data that you have. That is gold when it comes to figuring out a donor acquisition strategy. If you're not totally clear on what first party data is, that's any data that your organization owns. So anything that comes from your analytics that you have on your site, whether that's Adobe or within the Google Suite, your CRM, visitors on your website, any data that you own about your constituents is just absolute gold in terms of going out and targeting folks. And how we use that is, I think Christine mentioned a few really great examples of creating lookalike models. That really gives you a pointed group of folks to go after for acquiring new donors. A strategy that's worked well for a lot of our clients here at AGP is targeting non-donor contacts. So This is folks that you might have on file because they've maybe attended an event or agreed to subscribe to a newsletter or your emails. They haven't donated yet. Those are folks that are pretty far in the journey to some degree, so we can effectively target them and convince them to become donors. There is, I think, a missed opportunity for a lot of organizations right now within acquisition is relying just on direct mail. Direct mail is great and powerful and will always have a huge role in the work that all of us do, but there's a huge opportunity to really pair the data together and really combine and enhance your strategies for direct mail and digital together. Across a lot of our clients, we've successfully taken direct mail acquisition lists and have loaded them into programmatic platforms, into social platforms, and use those lists to kind of acquire. And we have seen that pretty successfully lift things in the digital realm as well as the direct realm. We've also seen a lot of upgrade potential in identifying a first-party data audience comprised of those who might have purchased merchandise or something like that. And that is a great foot in the door to nurture. I know we have a lot of public media folks on the call today. Something that's worked well for a lot of the stations that we've worked with is kind of getting folks in the door through maybe a passport subscription or activation, and then nurturing them along to become donors and supporters in the long term. Another really great way to use your first party data is suppressing donors that you already have. Unless you're going with a retention, stewardship, or upgrade message, you don't want to waste your precious budget dollars trying to acquire folks you already have on file. So there's a lot of ways that making sure you suppress in your ad platform the donors that you have that fit certain criteria, that can be a really helpful way to make sure that data goes a lot further. I'm going to show another example of, this is from a client of ours in the faith category, and I know we've got a lot of folks in that category as well. This has been a really powerful example of how we've leveraged a few different data points for some really strong donor acquisition and conversion. The first is points of interest data. We can target folks based on where they've been. So in this instance, it was a client within a certain faith category, and we were able to target folks that were at certain types of churches, and not just passing by, but folks that had been there repetitively and for slightly extended periods of time. You can target events, concerts of a certain type. So this is a really powerful strategy to make sure that you're finding people that are exhibiting and demonstrating behavior that fits the types of folks you want to acquire in your program. Keyword and contextual targeting is a fascinating data-driven way to target folks. So this is the ability to reach individuals that are currently viewing and searching for faith-based content. What makes this really powerful is that in a lot of instances, there's technology involved where we can make sure that the sentiment of the content is supportive of your mission. So that has been really powerful, again, just to make sure we're out there targeting and speaking to the right types of folks. And then predictive targeting. There's a lot that goes into this, but this is looking at just tons and tons of data points, looking at demographic behaviors of folks, where they've purchased, what other types of donor organizations they've supported in the past. What do we know about their household? What content are they consuming? And all of that technology goes out and finds kind of impressions and placements that it then predicts will be the most likely to lead to a conversion, which in this instance is acquiring a donation. So this is incredibly powerful. Switching over to an example in the healthcare space, there has been a lot of innovation in this space. A huge opportunity in healthcare is being able to target by a known connection to a certain diagnosis. So this is an example of a tool that we have access to here. For those of you that work in healthcare, this is HIPAA and NAI compliant, I promise you. But this is a really powerful way that we can go in and target folks with a known connection to a specific diagnosis. You can see this particular example on the screen is showing some data points related to premature birth and hypertension. This is a strategy we've used incredibly successfully for a client in the healthcare space, where we can target by a cancer diagnosis as someone who is diagnosed or also a caregiver. So this has been really, really powerful in the space, because again, if someone has a known connection to the mission that your organization serves, the likelihood of being able to acquire them and nurture them to a donor is huge. So this has really been a game-changing resource for a lot of our healthcare clients. The next topic is really interesting. I know, given some of the insights that I saw, but some of the categories folks we have on the call today, many of you have already been affected or might soon be affected by changes in federal funding in various methods. So there has been a lot of eagerness on some organizations to talk about that message really directly. Others have been very hesitant for one reason or another. And a lot of that uneasiness tends to come from not wanting to alienate realistically 50% of your donor base who might be leaning toward one political persuasion or another. And we had the opportunity, this is an example from our client Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which does a lot of work in the environmental space, protecting the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And what they did, and a number of our other clients, including some of those in the food bank space and others, have been able to use first-party data and some other data partnerships to segment our message delivery within paid media by political affiliation. So kind of one group based on political affiliation might get something that is a little bit more generic, so to speak, that still speaks about the need, but it's a little bit softer, like you kind of see there on the right, where it talks a little bit about the need. It's a little less aggressive, so to speak. The example on the left is much more aggressive. You know, both talk about the match, but the administration particularly is being called out here. And this was a tactic that was incredibly successful for this client as well as some of the others. So for those of you that may be kind of wrestling internally with how do we talk about the impact of some of these budget changes and the impact it means to the people and the mission that we serve, know that you do have a lot of ways to kind of control how and to whom you get those messages. So that is just a really, really interesting opportunity. Just another example of that when we talk about data partnerships. So there are some kind of third-party data partners like SleepSync and TargetSmart. Some of you may have heard of them. Those are opportunities where you can sort of buy and have access to political segments. Like you can see on the image at the left, we can identify folks specifically based on they're a member of the Democratic Party, Republican, Independent, things like that. Christine, in her presentation earlier, mentioned the use of Giving DNA. This, for those of you on the call that are AGP clients, you likely have access to Giving DNA, but that is also a segment with different political views that we can build out of that and then port that directly into an ad platform like paid social or even programmatic ad platforms as well. So again, just some really interesting ways that just given kind of the chaos that's happening in the political landscape and funding, there is really a massive opportunity for you out there to kind of use those acquisition strategies in your program. I don't think in my 2.5 years here at AGP that I have heard a client who doesn't want to grow and diversify their donor base when they're going out and doing acquisition. And so this is an example of a really interesting data set that we get through some of the programmatic work that we do in the digital space. So this is something that is a result of display, rich media ads, video. What this data point or output, excuse me, does is it isolates just the folks completed your core action in a campaign, which in the instance of this client example, it was someone that donated for the first time. It isolates just the folks that did that action, and it kind of runs them back through a profiling system and kind of generates then some potential profiles. And what this is meant to do is give you additional ideas or thought starters of additional audiences that you can kind of go after and pursue as you look to diversify your donor base. So this was a really interesting client example where, we thought it would be the people that would react the most would be folks that skewed a little bit older. But what we saw is these sort of jet set urbanites, as they're called in this example, where they're actually quite a bit younger than we thought it. No kids in the household, relatively young. So this was a fascinating insight for us to then use that data and go and include segments like that into our prospecting acquisition audiences for future campaigns. Another massive opportunity to use data is in CTV, and we're kind of calling this, when we talk about breaking the mold, I want to encourage you to break the mold in terms of what you might think about something like DRTV. DRTV also still has a place, and for those of you who might have millions and millions of dollars in your budget, traditional DRTV may very well be a strong opportunity for you, but where we have seen success in acquisition, also as well as in retention and upgrade, is kind of rethinking that approach to DRTV and using a data-driven approach in the CTV space. Connected TV, for those of you who might not be familiar, that is basically where you can watch TV or video on any device connected to the internet. It's the most simple way I'll explain it. And so we find that this works because all of that same first party data and data sources that I've been talking about in the last couple of slides, all of that data is opportunity that you can feed into a CTV video strategy like this. So you can see an example of some of the great work for Water for People that we've done there. This is really powerful too, because not only does it have a really great data-driven approach, but we can wrap these things with a custom skin that helps your brand consistently be present, pop a little bit more, and then feature something like a QR code where you have an additional opportunity for someone to immediately take action. So this type of approach is really, really powerful as well. You can see a handful of other category examples here, but this is just a really interesting data-driven way to do that. And I talked a couple of slides ago about innovation in healthcare data. This is something that we've used really successfully in the healthcare space as well with video, which has been really exciting. I want to highlight an example next from one of our clients, City of Hope, that is within the cancer and diabetes research space. They're a client who really, really does a phenomenal job of using data to drive acquisition, retention, and everything in between. This is a bit of a snapshot of some of the activity we had in market Giving Tuesday of 2024. You see a lot of arrows happening on this slide, and that is really to signify that even though every single thing that you see on here, from the paid digital media to the email and the direct mail, was very data driven and targeted based on the goals and objectives of the Giving Tuesday program, we took the use of data to another level because all these, especially digital points, sort of were able to speak to each other on the back end, and we were able to optimize the mix over time, shift budget to what elements were lifting acquisition the most. We were sharing data between CTV and direct mail to lift the overall acquisition there. So this is a really powerful way, especially, Christine talked a lot about the importance of a full funnel. A full funnel is possible. I think any type of organization, any size. And so this is a great example of for City of Hope, a bit larger organization where we built a really robust interactive funnel. This same type of thing is possible if you're a smaller organization as well. We just have to be a little bit more strategic about some of the budget mix and how we exactly build that together. But having a program where the various elements integrate and really speak to each other is a massive opportunity for acquisition. Christine also did a great job of speaking about the awareness and bringing folks into the funnel. This is an example, a bunch of different client categories that high impact rich media. This is something that you can see there's about a million different ways that this could go, but this is a way to have a data-driven approach where we kind of talked about maybe using lookalikes of your current donors. The technology goes out and finds more folks like that. and then serve them a really engaging message that speaks to your organization, that lets them know what your mission is. It gives them a little bit more of a suggestion about what they might see as they engage.
Hey Laura, your audio, we're losing it just a little bit. We could hear
Oh,
you, but
shoot. Okay.
I don't know if maybe turning your camera off will give us more bandwidth
Oh,
for your
that's
audio.
okay. Thanks for the heads up on that.
Sure.
Let me know if it gets better.
It does sound better.
Excellent. Thank you for the heads up and apologies, everybody.
Sure.
On the
Yeah.
next slide, we just wanted to share a couple quick nuggets of advice for um, just kind of low-hanging fruit for those of you. This is advice we give to all of our clients, but I think especially those that might have really modest budgets, there's an opportunity for this to be some really great low-hanging fruit that can actually make a huge impact on your acquisition. So we talked a lot about maximizing first-party data already, so I'm not going to repeat that, but also being really, really smart about your campaign structure. So this is an example of a very simple structure in a Facebook campaign. But I think there's a tendency with a lot of organizations, if you have a lot of audience segments that you want to target, a lot of them want to have a campaign for each one or an ad set for each one because they ultimately want to see every single audience and compare it against each other. We recommend, and this is also kind of Meta's best practice as well, we really recommend that you try to condense some of your campaign structures and set up, in platforms like Meta, but in some of the others as well. We want things to be a little more simplified. And what that does is it really helps maximize the kind of human element of optimization, which is huge. But it also gives the algorithmic side of the optimization a little bit more opportunity to have data points to pull from, and it kind of gets you out of the learning phase quicker. We have seen just moving to a simplified campaign setup in acquisition campaigns and really all types of campaigns. We have seen that make massive improvements for clients. And then, of course, creative variation. You know, inherently in all of the platforms, whether it's Google, whether it's Meta, really any digital platform, there's kind of some inherent and required variability in terms of assets such as text, headlines, images, videos. Those of you who have explored Google Performance Max, that's a great example. We really encourage you to take advantage of as many of the variations as you can. Again, this is really just an opportunity of more data that then the platform has to kind of optimize and test against in real time. Some of the last things I'm going to talk through is one of our other best in class examples from our client, the National Audubon Society, that really kind of brings to life a full funnel data-driven strategy. So Audubon recently revised a lot of their program to really have kind of one singular journey to convince someone to become a member or a donor. And so I'm not going to necessarily walk through everything on here because we're just about at time for Q&A, but we have a lot of data-driven strategies that are at the top of the funnel on Meta using rich media, using native placements, really looked at building that awareness of who Audubon was and the work that they do. And we adjust these topics monthly, sometimes quarterly, based on seasonality, for example. And so then we'll look at the data and identify which of these segments are most successful at getting folks to the next stage in the journey, which is mid-funnel. In this aspect of the journey, we're really trying to get folks that we've reached in some way, whether they took any sort of initial action at all, but we know that they were exposed to our message. We then try to get them to take a first action and become a lead. So Christine talked about some of these strategies for the Water for People program as well, but this is, a lot of times it's a combination of a fixed cost per lead program. Care 2 is one example, but there's a number of others that do this as well. But really making sure that folks are being nurtured through email campaigns to stay engaged on that content to further educate them. We also have really successfully used lead gen on Meta, again, to get folks on file, to get them to take that first action. For those of you that have sort of an advocacy angle to the part of the organization that your work does, using an advocacy focused message to kind of acquire folks in this mid-funnel type of stage can be really, really impactful. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we need to raise revenue for the mission and the important work that you all do. So in the bottom funnel, this is where we really are layering on data even more. We are, retargeting folks. We are, that have been on the site but have maybe not made a donation. We are trying to take folks who maybe have signed up in one of those mid-funnel steps. They've become a lead to the organization. They're getting our emails, but they haven't donated yet. So we are targeting directly. Paid search obviously is a massive opportunity for donor acquisition as well. And that generally is one of the top performing tactics for a lot of our clients. But this is really where we can put the data into overdrive in a lot of ways because of the audiences we've built, because of those who have interacted the best, because of what we're seeing that they do on other channels, and we're really able to make a powerful ask in the bottom funnel. So in closing, I just want to communicate to everybody that I think, again, at any budget level, I think there are kind of quick wins in terms of how you can really try to maximize the impact of your data-driven digital acquisition. Cover some of the lowest hanging fruit first. Have your smart campaign structures, maximize the heck out of your first party data. And expand and scale according to your peak seasons. We know that not everybody, especially as they're first kind of proving their case or getting started in the acquisition space, you might not be able to have evergreen ads, but we'd really encourage folks to kind of identify your peak seasons. For a lot of clients, that is covering November and December 1st as a test case and then moving on from there. But again, you can start small and then again use the data to help guide you where to expand your strategy next. A lot of testing and learning. So this is something you can kind of do in real time, as digital campaigns are active. But then as you're reviewing your entire program holistically, you can identify opportunities to reinvest and reengage. I think Christine did a great job of speaking about this as well, but have a measurement plan, get alignment going in on what is the KPI, make sure that you can measure your KPI effectively so that therefore you can optimize against it. That is great, not just for acquisition, but really for any sort of engagement campaign. And with that, we are going to put it to questions. So hopefully my sound cooperates a little bit better, but if not, I'll go back off camera. Leah, do you want to help us out with any questions we may have?
Yeah, I'm just getting that pulled up here. And also we've had a really great engagement in the chat. Yes, Ashley, I'll answer your question right now. We will be emailing out the slides and the recording post webinar, as well as any questions that we are not able to get to today. The first question comes from Allison, who asks, how many of you successfully used geofencing to gather POI data?
We use geofencing quite a bit. Some of our clients do that in varying degrees, but a really interesting example of our client in the law enforcement space, Police Week was last week, and so we were able to do some geofencing around the National Mall, around some key sites where we knew large groups of potential donors would be. So geofencing can be a really powerful component, but that is not the only way that you can get that POI data. You can get that through programmatic ad networks and partners that way as well. But that is definitely becoming more and more common.
Are there any additional considerations for geofencing? And I asked this, Laura, kind of just as a general follow-up for some folks who may be a little bit kind of nervous about geofencing or aren't really sure how to maybe identify like the right areas. So like, for example, I know a long time ago on Meta, you kind of had to geofence based on certain zip codes. So what are just some general kind of guidelines or things to know about geofencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. On Meta, you definitely still have to be kind of broad. You can get a little bit more specific now than just the zip code, but where we've seen the most success with geofencing really kind of moving the needle is when we work with some of our programmatic ad networks to do that. And with a programmatic partner, you can draw a really tight geofence, like literally envision a really specific parameter around let's say, those of you that go to Bridge, around the massive hotel where Bridge is, you can like identify and capture just a specific venue and stuff like that. We've done that for a bunch of clients as well when they have really specific things that they want to do. So I think that is an opportunity. Know that geofencing, for the most part, is reaching folks on a mobile device. Like that's how you're capturing them and getting them into the funnel. So you just want to make sure that you have, I think as most organizations do know, but you want to make sure that you have the right mobile experience to pay it off in terms of wherever you're sending them. Generally, when you kind of reach someone with geofencing, you can keep them sort of in the pool, so to speak. I think it's generally up to about 30 days. So you also want to think about after you kind of get them into your pool, what you want to do with them. I hope that provides some additional context for everybody.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, just as a personal note, I definitely notice whenever I like land somewhere new and turn my phone off airplane mode, I immediately see a huge difference in the ads I'm being served up. So, for example, last week I was in the New Mexico Santa Fe area, and there's a large experience there called Meow Wolf where you can go and kind of do this like interactive experience. And like the second I turned my phone off airplane mode, I was being served ads to buy tickets. And so that was a really great, like, super specific. We know people coming here know about this experience, and here's how you can get tickets. All right, one more. Oh, sorry. Did you have a follow-up question?
No, I was just saying that's a perfect example. That happens to me all the time too.
Yes. You're like, oh, don't have any questions about what there is to do here. Yes. So another question that came in from someone anonymously was, what do you consider a healthy average gift amount? And maybe this is a good question for Christine, because I would imagine that this probably is kind of specific to an organization.
Yes, but I will say that I'd mentioned we started off with like a really inflated average gift. And so I really did have to lean on Allegiance Group to help me kind of reset our expectations for what an average gift should be, especially as we were starting to invest in strategies. So I can share that for us right now, for the current fiscal year projection that we're in, we're trying to align with about $120 average gift, and that's an overall average gift. It can look really different through our email communication versus what we're doing in the mail. So I think that's another piece to probably pay close attention to. We get to much higher average gifts through our email cultivation strategies. But I would ask Laura and Matthew, across the clients that you see, is there something that you consistently recommend in this space?
I would say for us, I hate to say it varies, but on the IMS team here at AJP, we probably touch, depending on the time of year, anywhere from about 40 to 50 different organizations within paid media. And it can be very different. Something that my team has probably heard me say ad nauseum is like the best benchmarks are your own. So, when I think about goals, I would take a look at what is your average gift now, and then look to find ways, and that's where you can really use the data. Look at what certain channels, whether it's direct mail, email, paid advertising, look at what these other channels and things that you are trying for donor acquisition, look at the average gift by channel, by strategy, and then start to shift your dollars toward those that are giving you those higher average gifts. Matthew, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, it would just be rationalizing that with the volume that each channel provides as well and finding whatever that right investment mix is.
What else do we have,
Okay.
Leah?
I haven't seen any other questions come in, and so if you guys want to start wrapping up, if there's any more that come in within the next 30 seconds to a minute, I think we can get you an answer for you. But if there's no other questions, I think we can wrap up.
All right. I'll be on the lookout to see if anything comes through. But as Leah mentioned, this webinar is recorded. I appreciate everyone's patience with the sound. Anyone else that is in the Midwest, I'm in the Milwaukee area, you know that the weather has not been cooperating lately. So I wonder if that's a little bit behind my issues. But we really appreciate your time and your attention. This will be sent as a follow-up. And so I think you'll have, a lot of you also probably have my contact information and Matthew's information from some of the emails that have come out since you registered. So you can feel free to reach out to us that way with questions as well. But huge thanks to Christine and all the folks at Water for People, especially for their support in today's content.
Thank you so much for including us.
Thank
It was
you.
great to be here.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.